Valois Dukes of Burgundy established one of the strangest and most extravagant courts of late medieval Europe. From their base in Burgundy, by marriage and diplomacy, they acquired large areas of the Netherlands to build an extensive, though fragmented state of vast wealth. In 1404, Duke Philip the Bold died at the Stag Inn near Brussels. 20 years earlier, his royal sculptors had begun work on Philip's tomb. One of them carved these images of the funeral procession which transported his body back to Burgundy.
Clothed in the habit of a Carthusian monk, Philip's embalmed body was sealed in a great lead coffin and then carried in a funeral cortege which took nearly 7 weeks to wind the 250 miles from Brussels to Dijon. Accompanied by his sons, his chaplains, and members of his royal court, the hearse was drawn by 6 horses caparisoned in black, with the blue banners of Burgundy fluttering at its corners. At Dijon, it was received not only by the weeping clergy, but by 100 chosen townspeople and 100 poor, also clad in black at the Duke's expense. And so, as with the other great royal and ducal rituals of the later Middle Ages, death itself could be turned into an act of public theatre. Philip's tomb itself lay just outside Dijon, at the Carthusian monastery of Champmol. It took nearly 30 years to complete and was finished after his death in 1414. 3 sculptors worked on it, but among them was a forgotten genius of European art, the man who conceived this remarkable evocation of that funeral procession, Klaus Sluter.
He came from Haarlem in the Netherlands and worked for the Duke of Burgundy for 20 years in Dijon. Sluter's most impressive carving was a life-size monument known as the Well of Moses, with prophets from the Old Testament around its base. The well was placed at the center of the monastery of Champmol, where the Dukes of Burgundy were buried. In Italy, Donatello was only 10 years old when Sluter began to carve these figures, which display an intense realism never seen before in European sculpture. As this reconstructed model shows, the Well of Moses was originally brilliantly painted. The prophets deliver their prophecies like figures from a medieval mystery play. The whole piece was intensely theatrical, linking the prophecies of the Old Testament to the sacrifice of Christ on the cross. And originally, the well was surmounted by a life-sized crucifixion group. This crucifix was smashed to pieces during the French Revolution, and the largest fragment that remains is the head of Christ. Somehow, Sluter's carving conveys both the agony of Christ on the cross and the release from suffering which death has brought. Life at the Burgundian court was not always dominated by thoughts of God and death. The Dukes of Burgundy were famous for their tournaments, their banquets, and their extravagance. They placed great importance on all the arts, so their court could be seen and heard as one of the grandest in Europe. Because this was a traveling court, moving between the palaces of their scattered duchy, many of their artistic treasures were portable: tapestries, metalwork, and illuminated manuscripts. All this medieval extravagance was principally paid for by the Burgundian Netherlands, the most highly urbanized area of Europe. During the 15th century, Bruges became the busiest port in northern Europe, while Brussels and Ghent became two of its largest industrial cities. We can catch a realistic glimpse of Flemish urban life through the window of religious paintings, such as this Madonna by Robert Campin. In Italy, 15th century artists used perspective and the study of antiquity to depict a suitable setting for their religious paintings. By contrast, a northern painter such as Campin, in his Mérode altarpiece, saw no great divide between the distant past and the present, between the look of antiquity and the late medieval world. Joseph, in his carpenter's workshop, is depicted with detailed realism, both the tools of his trade and the townscape visible through the window. One sign of the success of Bruges as a trading centre was its wealthy community of Italian merchants and bankers. Out of this community came the most famous wedding portrait in Western art.
Here in 1434, Jan van Eyck shows Giovanni Arnolfini, a hugely wealthy Italian moneylender and tapestry dealer to Duke Philip the Good of Burgundy. He is about to marry an equally wealthy young Italian, Giovanna Cenami, whose family lived in France. And here you see the shifty, rabbity banker, one hand raised and the other joined to that of his new bride. The artist proclaims his witnessing presence in a bold Gothic legal inscription in Latin. This reads, Jan van Eyck was here. While Italians were developing their illusionistic art with the assistance of mathematically reasoned perspective, northern painters, led by Jan van Eyck, used many translucent layers of pigments in quick-drying oils to produce uniquely convincing pictorialism. Among Jan's most compelling portraits, this man's features may be the artist's own. They have some of that fixed, almost hypnotic quality that sometimes results from staring into a mirror for self-portrayal. We also know that artists in the 15th century often wore such flamboyant red turbans, which is another reason for suspecting that the identity of the sitter is Jan van Eyck himself. The most famous European painter of his day, Jan van Eyck was also a diplomat, mapmaker, and chemist. Enormously learned, he was concerned with Latin and Greek and studied Hebrew mysticism. Here Jan van Eyck depicts the most powerful figure at the Burgundian court, Chancellor Rollin, kneeling before the Madonna. In such works, a saint usually presented the donor, the person paying for the painting, to the Virgin and Child. But Rollin decided to appear before the Madonna without benefit of introduction. So Van Eyck linked the figures with Romanesque architecture and a view of the heavenly city and landscape beyond, realized by the almost magical glow of the oil medium.
Nicolas Rollin was the chief minister of Duke Philip the Good of Burgundy for nearly 40 years. He became one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Europe, and at the height of his career, he made a spectacular donation to charity.